holidays abroad, and I'd never been abroad. And actually, looking back, I recognized that the institution that I was in was not an institution made for me, that I had to shape myself to the institution. That was the expectation. I was expected actually to become in Wales a young English girl with all the trappings of an English person, and a middle-class English girl, because that was how England was presented to us. And it actually made me shape the Camfed program, because the girls that we were supporting were going into a system, a boarding school system, where there were electric lights, there were taps they could turn on. They had never experienced these. There were no books at home. They were coming from homes were made of mud and thatch. And I recognized that they too might feel a sense of their exclusion. So the headmaster, Mr. Churai, who was a very radical headmaster, we talked about this, and he said, you know, the social context that we create here for these girls is going to be critical. And I was talking with him 4 years later, and we had a journalist from Sweden with us, and he said, you know, the first year they came, and he said they were much smaller than the other girls because they were poorly nourished, and you could pick them out. He said their hair was unfashionable, they didn't have any extensions, and they looked shy. And they stayed very much together. The second year, some of them were kind of moving into other friendship circles and were more confident in their body language. And they were growing. They were growing physically because they were now getting nutritious meals every day. By the third year, they were almost all of them were now fully integrated, and you couldn't tell them apart. They too had their hair extensions, and you know, they were socially feeling very comfortable. In the fourth year, all the 21 girls supported actually got full certificates, which meant they got maths, English, and science. Now, that was very unusual in Zimbabwe at the time, for girls to get full certificates. Every one of them got that. And Runyararo Machingaidzi was top of all the girls in the school. So this was a remarkable transition, and I'm convinced that the whole process by which they were supported socially in that school environment, as well as being given the educational opportunity, really determined the successful outcome. So, you know, when we're thinking about designing programs, when we're thinking about our institutions, it is about those social processes. It is about that sense of inclusion. It is about the nuances. And I think the nuances in Camfed are very acutely important. And I think the organization has a very high level of social and emotional intelligence, because we do very much draw on our own experiences. We recognize its value, and it gives us insight into the worlds that we are now a part of, and a part of creating an enabling environment. So it's really using our own experience as a bridge and looking out at the world through the eyes of a child, and through, really, it might sound new age, but through the eyes of the child we ourselves, each one of us, once were. There's a quotation that I love, which is, "In the little world in which children have their existence, there is nothing so finely perceived or finely felt as injustice." I don't know if any of you recognize that, but it is in fact from Great Expectations. And Dickens was, of course, writing about a 19th century world in which children really had a very troubled existence. In many, many cases, they were in labor situations which undermined their health. The streets of London were basically full of children who were near destitute. And that was the world that he was describing. Amartya Sen uses this quotation to start his book, his latest book, An Idea of Justice. But you know, we still live in that world. We haven't moved on from that world. We live in a global environment in which millions and millions of children live in a state of destitution with no opportunity at the beginning of the 21st century. This is the adult world for which we are responsible, that we have created. And we have astonishing advantages, we have astonishing opportunities, and yet the sharing and the lack of equitable distribution of those resources is keeping children in a state of utter destitution. And unless we recognize that, we will not solve the global problems that we face. We will not ever reach the Millennium Development Goals. And of course, there is now recognition that girls and girls' education plays a very, very significant part of that because of the fundamental importance of girls and to the next generation. So in justice, girls should be in school, but also from the point of view of the creation of a new world, of a better world, girls should be in school. And I just want to introduce you to the context of one in Ghana. I'm sure not, perhaps all of you have been to Africa, or perhaps been into the rural areas, and indeed been into the difficult context in the cities. But I just want to contextualize the work for you so that you can see, meet some of the girls that we work with.
When I was 13, I left my village to earn money for my school. I did that because my parents cannot afford school, so I have to do that for myself. When I got out of the bus, I was very scared. I didn't know what to do, and I didn't know anybody there. I became a carrier, then I have to carry goods for people. First, it was actually very hard because I've never carried such a thing in my life. But you can't complain because you'll get another person to take the load. Where I was sleeping is a risky place. We were more than 10 in a room and we were crowded because the room was too small for all of us. Every evening, the man come around, they say, give me your money, can I have your money? It's like if you refuse to give them, they try to rape you, or they just they will try to do something to hurt you, or they kill you and run away. One night, a girl refused to give some men her money, and they brought a gun out and they shot the girl. She was staying in a room next to me. I wish I can go back home, but I just have to cope with that. They told me that I'm doing the work forever, and I said no, I came because of money, because I want to go back to school. I miss going to school.
Question number 2. We wrote question number 3. Question number 2.
I was a very good student, one of the best.
And then you tell me the answer. Is that okay? Yes. We are learning, aren't we? Yes. We are learning. Hey.
Thank you. As you see, that was it was part of our Christmas seasonal appeal, in fact. But the point I want to make about this is that actually it's understanding the realities of her life is what enables us to support her and other girls like her. The girls in the program, the young women in the program, the educators, we are those who are being taught, and unless we accept that role fully, then we will not design programs that are efficacious and successful. And I think that is why Camfed is successful. So when we started with a very small group. And as Sally said, it was a bake sale. My long-suffering friends stood on Cambridge Market with me, and we sold cakes that we'd baked the day before. And with that, we raised that money. We raised money from friends and family, and that's how we started. Because the reality was that I wasn't just a novice, I was a complete non-starter. I had never worked in international development, but I saw this context and I felt something should be done and something could be done. But I was told, no, it's not about poverty, it's about culture. People have told you what they think they want you to hear, and this didn't make any sense to me at all. I thought, everybody's in this very poor rural village in Zimbabwe doesn't get on message because I've arrived and this is what you need to tell this woman, it's about poverty, not about culture. No, that didn't make any sense to me. So I put my trust in actually the people who, again, were teaching me in the village and taught me what I saw was essentially the truth, was that this problem was fundamentally about poverty, and people were making decisions that made complete sense in their socio-economic context, and that was to educate sons who had a much better chance of paid work. Girls were going to marry and take any benefits of their education away to their marital home with them. And so in the absence of social security, in the absence of a pension, children, and boys particularly, were the security system for the future. When you could no longer grow what you eat, it made complete sense. And I think we would all have been making that same decision if we had been forced by the circumstances of poverty to make that decision. So it's recognizing that people are making rational choices in a context of poverty. And indeed, I think the astonishing the different issues that come into play when you are poor, they tend to be much more complex. People are making decisions that have a bearing on survival on a day-by-day basis, and so there is a great complexity in their decision making. And so it was recognizing that, and recognizing that if it was about poverty, it wasn't about a change in attitude, it wasn't about persuasion, then actually the poverty could be addressed by bringing new resources into the community. So I went back to Zimbabwe, I went back to the community, and I said, I'm back, and what can we do together? And we sat together. The chief called a meeting, and the community came, and we designed what is in effect the Camfed model, which is about a democratic system in which transparency and accountability is at the center, where there is a community development committee, very broadly based, that actually is the fundamental decision-making body. And that body is accountable to Camfed, more importantly, accountable to the community at large. So anybody is in a position to challenge any decision. And that is really at the center of our model. And as we grew, we brought more girls into the program, we grew into Ghana, and we realized that, yes, girls were going to get through the education system, but what then? In the rural context, there were no jobs, there were no opportunities for them to take. So how did we now think about the creation of an environment in which young women, young educated women, could contribute? And so we established an alumni. We thought, well, what do the powerful groups in the world do to consolidate their power? They establish alumni. And there's a very successful alumni, of course, here in Cambridge. So we thought, a rural young women's alumni, CAMA. They called it CAMA, and it started with the first 300 graduates from secondary education. Lucy Lake, who's the deputy director, and I were working together by this time. Well, in fact, had been working together since 1993, and it was Lucy who really drove that forward. And I think it was the most critical decision we have made in the history of Camfed, because what it enabled us to do was capitalize on the investment in the early years and enable young women to create a social network. So there are 14,005 members now. They are united by a background of rural poverty, and they are united by a desire for change. Now, just two of them, of course, Ranyararo is a member, but aside from Ranyararo, Angeline Murimiwa, I don't know if you know the book Half the Sky by Nick Kristof and Cheryl Woodun, she features in that. She's the director in Zimbabwe of Camfed. Her deputy, Faith Nkala, is also a former beneficiary. So these were the founding members of CAMA, but whom I met as 13-year-old schoolgirls who had just graduated from primary school and had no opportunity to move on. So they are becoming the leaders. It has, in fact, come full circle. 60% of the staff in Zimbabwe are, in fact, people who have gone through the program. And indeed, the leadership into Malawi has, in fact, been led by, again, someone who came into the program, Winnie Farao. That makes it's a virtuous cycle. It's a virtuous cycle of change through which you invest in the early years and you capitalize and you enable young women to really become the leaders. So at the moment, we are really advising very powerful institutions on their strategies and their policies, because this program is working. We're part of the Goldman Sachs initiative, the 10,000 Women initiative. We have funding from major banks and major institutions, governments, the Irish government, the British government, the US government. We have managed to create a very broad spread of funders, giving us, in fact, a lot of funding security for our program. But more importantly, what we have across 5 countries now is an infrastructure that is very, 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 very strong, that is made up of schools, of teachers, of government workers, of ministries of education, and of course of the leadership of Camfed itself, and the young women who've gone through the program, who actually have formed this extraordinary alliance that is now really making waves in their countries. So it started from a bake sale. I was in Tanzania this time last week. I was in a district called Rufiji, and I was looking at the initiatives started by young groups, young cooperative groups of Kama. And I told them, I said, you know, Camfed started with baking cakes. A market stall, I said, much colder than your market stalls, but that's how it began. And they love that. They love that idea, you know, that from small beginnings, these things can grow, and who knows where some of their businesses are going to go and grow. But that, in my time allotted, is the very brief story of Camfed. And of course, here in Cambridge, what an opportunity we have to learn and share from each other. And so, you know, I'm very ready and open to your ideas. I have, you know, if you'd like to be in touch with us, we're based down in Mill Lane, and our website is pretty comprehensive at camfed.org. So thank you so much for listening to the Camfed story and for allowing me to share it. And, you know, I'm very much looking forward to being in a dialogue with many of you. Thank you.